Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Good morning.
No?
Good morning.
Good morning. May I have everyone take their seats, please? I'm Sandy Frank. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Lee County, and I'd like to welcome you to this League educational event, Affordable Attainable Housing in Lee County. This is part of the League's efforts to increase understanding of public policy issues. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan citizens organization working to improve our government and engage all citizens in the decisions that impact their lives. Since 1920, the League has worked to empower voters, to defend democracy, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. We believe that every family deserves a decent home and a suitable living environment. The League also supports governing that provides leadership and coordination to solve economic and social issues and assures needed services to all citizens. Today, we have two excellent speakers to further our understanding of the housing issue. And the speakers will highlight the housing needs for low to moderate income Lee County residents, current actions to address these needs, resources, and solutions to make affordable housing attainable. We will have question and answer for each speaker and discussion of actions and next steps toward the end of the program. For those on Zoom, we ask that you, during the presentation, you stay on mute and put your comments and questions in the chat, and you will have an opportunity to participate that way. Before our speakers, I would like to introduce the League board who's here, and they will talk a little bit about their initiatives and the work that the League is doing. So at the front table, I have Stacia Arcarice, who is our secretary, and you met Anna Callwood and Amy Wolf at the registration table. They're still out there. Let's see who's here. Jerry, I saw Jerry Ware, who does voter registration. And we're always looking for, yes, Jerry does a fabulous job. Do you have anything you'd like to say, Jerry? Thank you. Betsy Vaughn, who's our director of education. And Betsy, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple quick things without going over. One thing to keep on your in the front of your brain that we're going to oppose is, and have you heard about the new laws? In so many ways, so just listen for that one. And another one that, okay, and another one that you're going to be hearing lots and lots and lots about is HB 1, and that's the Family Empowerment Scholarship. This year there were a lot of changes where we have a lot of students. I don't know if I hadn't heard the facts on this yet, but supposedly a lot of kids that have been in private school all along picked up that scholarship this year. And it was never, that wasn't the original intent. And there's meetings happening to expand this program. And so the vouchers, that's another big one. And there's so many others with education. That's all I'm going to say right now. Just there's a lot with education.
Thank you, Betsy. And for those who want to get involved in all of these education issues, Betsy is putting together an education committee for the League, and we will be working on those issues. So please let us know if you're interested in that. Another issue that we're involved in, and many of you were at our meeting last month, clean water, environment, climate, and natural resources. The coordinators for that are not present in the room today, Adrian Kaltman and Clara Ann Graham. But again, we need league members to work on those issues. Health, is Dana on? Is Dana on Zoom? Okay. Dana Clark, who is our Director of Health, is working on health issues. She also is putting together a committee. And Judy Greenberger is here. She's working on health issues and especially reproductive health. We do have petitions for reproductive choice. If any of you have not signed those, please sign them today. And Kathy Mayo is waving as well. So and you can take some for your neighbors and friends and family and anyone you can think to sign those.
Sandy, can you hear me? It's Dana.
Oh, Dana. Okay, go ahead, Dana.
Okay, I just want to say that our committee is working on life-saving approaches, life-saving legislation, positive approach to the reproductive rights, as Sandy said, and also behavioral health. Gun violence is the leading cause of death in children right now. So we're going to be focusing on access to mental health care and the status of what is the mental health situation in Lee County. And I also am putting together a committee. So if any of you would be interested in working on those, educating and action in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. I'm going to skip over housing and social policy for a moment. Our event coordinator, Nancy Leverance, and you probably met her as you came in. Our Observer Corps coordinator, Sue Osen. And Sue, I see you have the mic. You want to say something? Okay. Okay. So our members, league members, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I always have a non sequitur.
Our league members observe government meetings and report to our board and to the members, so we have firsthand information and understanding of what's happening in government, and to give us a head start on taking action when we have the opportunity. Did I miss anyone who's in the room? We have a couple of internal things I'd just like to mention. We are getting prepared for our annual meeting. So anyone who's interested in being nominated for an office, we have a nominating committee and Judy Greenberger is also the chair of that. We're working on reviewing our bylaws to see if we need to do any changes, and we're working on our budget and our program for next year. So all members will have an opportunity for that. At this time, I'd like to thank the two coordinators for affordable housing, Lana Cowell and Jacqueline McMiller, who have put this program together and have been working on affordable housing issues, which we feel in this area are very critical. And I'm going to turn the program over to Jacqueline, who is our Director for Social Policy for the Lee County League. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to your participation today.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. And just to give you a little bit of a caveat, this boot, I did not get it from doing a backflip. So you just learn not to do it after 40 years old. I'd like to thank you for joining us with the League of Women Voters. I am the director of the social policy. And as you know, part of the social policy covers a lot of things, such as gun violence and some of the things that all of us are really, including housing, something that all of us in this room and across America is dealing with and knows that this is major, major, major issues. And as director of social policy with the League of Women Voters, we want to focus on those things that is very important to the people here in Lee County, as well as the Fort Myers and surrounding areas. If you would like to join us in doing this, since I know that this is such an important issue to each and every one of us in some way, shape, or form, we welcome you. If this is something that you have a passion for, we want you to join us, because we do understand that it takes a team. And it takes a group of people that with like-minded thoughts and passions to ensure that we engage as well as make change, the necessary changes that everyone can, specifically for housing, have a safe home and affordable housing within this particular area. And so with that, I ask you to join us. We have a team that we've built, which one of them, Lana Cowell, she's one of my co-chairs, and we speak on a constant basis and we keep track of the changes, some of the policies, ongoing policies, and we report to our board with what we're doing, as well as some of the thoughts and some of the changes that we'd like to make. Before we go on further, just to give you a little bit of an idea of the rules of the road, if we have any cell phones, what do you think that we need to do with the cell phones? Just a reminder, because mine have gone off in the middle of a meeting and that was not a pretty sight. If you have questions, anyone that has joined us on chat, we definitely want to hear anything and address any questions that you may have. Please put your questions in the chat. We have someone that will be monitoring the chat, and we would do everything in our power to ensure that those questions are posed to our speakers. For anyone that is on Zoom as well, please mute your sound. So therefore we don't have any chatter or anything in the background. If this is your first time to the collaboratory, just to give you an idea of what's with everything and the places with everything, the restrooms are out this door to your left and then make another right. So men and women's restrooms are there. They do have complimentary coffee. You're welcome to help yourself. And if there's anything else, as far as rules of the road, I always give the audience an opportunity to volunteer. What would you like to ensure to make this move smoothly and flow well? Other than the phones, anything, any other suggestions you would like? So I've touched on them. Great. So as our president indicated, Sandy indicated that we are the League of Women Voters. We have two wonderful speakers that we have worked diligently with having signed on here and agreed to come speak. One of our speakers, our first speaker will be Allan. Michael is the founder and president of ReVital Development Group. The ReVital Development Group mission is to preserve, create, and sustain high quality, safe, and affordable housing that supports economic security and access to opportunity for all. That's a mouthful, and that's what we're looking for. Since 2013, the principles of ReVital have developed over 275 million of multifamily, senior housing, and commercial projects in Florida. This includes over 1,300 residential units, 240 senior housing units, and 50,000 square feet of retail and commercial space. So at this time, I would like to introduce you to our very own Allan.
All right. Yeah,
Thank you.
there you go. And then are you guys setting up the presentation? Okay.
Yes, we'll just share your screen.
Oh, I'm sharing the screen over here. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. As Jacqueline mentioned, Michael Allan, ReVital Development Group. Appreciate the opportunity to present to you today and tell you a little bit about our company and what we're looking to accomplish, what we are currently working on, and some of the issues and needs nationally, state of Florida, and concentrated here in Lee County. As mentioned, the ReVital Development Group, we focus on the development and creation of affordable housing. We're based in Tampa. I've previously lived down here in Fort Myers. I relocated to Tampa in 2011, but Lee County has been and always continues to be our area of concentration. All of the development experience and background that Jacqueline mentioned earlier is, oh, perfect. Thank you.
You're too tall for that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect. All right. So, yeah, so as I was saying, all the development experience that we've done previously, as Jacqueline mentioned, the multifamily assisted living facilities, retail, that's all been done here locally in Lee County on the market rate side. Our affordable and workforce development concentration continues to be here in Lee County. We have a couple of projects outside of the area as well, including DeSoto County, and then all the way up north in Columbia County in Florida. But currently we have about little over 250 units under construction and permitting and planning, and then others as well that we're working on putting the financing together, which we can get to as well later on. But yeah, so to get started, so this is just pretty much the same background, so you can skip over to this slide as well. What I really wanted to get started on is really what is affordable housing and just some of the definitions and terms that we hear quite frequently. And one of the things that I often come across is just the very different definitions or opinions of what each term means. So, you know, a couple of the common terms that we hear is affordable housing, workforce housing, and then over the past few years, we start hearing more and more of what's called attainable housing. So one of the things that I know, like attainable housing, a lot of people refer to it as is just the negative kind of condensation thought process of affordable. People hear affordable housing and all of a sudden they kind of cringe and they don't want it. So we often deal with that as well. But for me, I mean, we're a big advocate of it as well, and want to continue to work on like the educational process. So the definition of affordable housing, if you're asking me, myself, it's on a rental side. And let me back up a little bit. We focus on the affordable multifamily rental aspect. There's also the homeowner aspect of it. I've said with multifamily market rate, I thought it was going to be an easy transition going into affordable development, but it is a completely different business, a whole nother concept. Takes a lot more work involved. So we focus solely on just the rental aspect, because even home ownership, again, it's a whole nother aspect of things. We like to focus on our area of expertise. So with affordable, if you're asking me in terms of the rental side, we refer to that as 60% of the area median income and below. And that's typically based off of federal guidelines for low-income housing tax credits. Low-income housing tax credits is a federal program that we focus on often with a lot of our development products. It's the largest contributor or subsidy nationally for the production and preservation of affordable housing on the rental side. Affordable housing, if you know, previously in the past has always kind of been defined on the federal level, but over the past several years, you start getting more and more state programs that are in place, or local programs. So that definition starts to kind of evolve a little bit depending on the conversation or even funding source that you're referring to. So, you know, affordable housing to some people like myself, it's 60% of the area median income or below. Other people you talk to, maybe it's 120 or 140% of the area median income. I disagree with that, but kind of one of my pet peeves on the rental side, you hear people saying, hey, we're doing 120% of the area median income. But you'll see later on, I have some slides that'll show that 120% of the area median income in Florida, not just here in Lee County, but a lot of the markets in Florida are at 120% AMI, or 120% exceeds market rate. So developers that are getting incentives for it, kind of a pet peeve of mine as well, because really they're just using that term. Workforce and attainable housing typically has a similar definition. It's kind of referred to as well as the missing middle, 80 to 120% of the area median income. So when I refer to the programs, when I say affordable, it's going to be 60% of the area median income and below. Workforce or attainable, 80 to 120% of the area median income. By HUD's definition, affordability is when a household spends no more than 30% of their gross income on housing. So it's rental or mortgage, and mortgage is your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So if a household spends more than 30% of their gross income, they're considered cost burden. A household that spends more than 50% of their gross income is severely cost burden. Now, that's just a historical definition. I think you can even argue the case that maybe it's probably less than that as cost burden today with inflation, the cost of all the other goods as well. So that's something to focus on and keep in mind as well. Income restrictions for different programs. Again, on the federal level, again, different definitions. So going by the federal definitions, HUD, so forth. Extremely low income is typically 30% or below of the area median income. Very low income is 50%. Low income is typically 80%. Moderate income is 120%. And then above moderate is typically 140% of the area median income. Some misconceptions about affordable housing that we often hear. So we often have a lot of objections when we're going into a new market or delivering a program. Only the unemployed or poor or persons of government assistance live in affordable housing, which this isn't true. You'll see some of the programs that we provide, they're for middle class and just really the labor force. So police officers, military personnel, firefighters, healthcare workers, bartenders, waitresses, several key essential workers within our community is what's kind of like the general occupancy of our products. Affordable housing will cause crime. We don't want it. We don't want it in our neighborhood because it's going to increase crime. Well, I think that's false as well. So it's affordable housing community can maintain a stable population by making it easier to retain people who already live and work there. Families who live in affordable housing seek the same thing every family does, which is a safe place to raise their children and an opportunity to enhance the value of what they own. Affordable housing can lower crime rates because the neighborhood cohesion and economic stabilities are enhanced. Affordable housing will cause home values to decrease. We hear that pretty much in every single neighborhood that we go into. But you'll see, I'll show you some renderings of some of the projects that we have in plan in Lee County right now. Aesthetically, exterior, interior wise, amenities. You go to one of the projects when they're completed, they're not going to look anything different than a market rate development right now. The only thing that's different is going to be the demographic and the rental rates and some of the other compliance requirements that we have to abide by. Okay, so there's a need for affordable and attainable housing. As most of you may know, that for most families, housing costs is the single highest expense for all households. Income disparity is a big problem, not only here in Lee County, but nationally. We're seeing with inflation, the cost of housing is certainly outpacing the cost of income. So that's really just exacerbating the problem right now, especially with the affordable side. The market rate developers, we're seeing the rents increase because they're having insurance costs go up, construction costs go up, and they could just push their rents because the demand is there. We don't have that luxury to do so. So it's certainly putting a lot of pressure on the demographic that we focus on as well. The cost of housing impacts disposable income for households' capacity to absorb emergency costs for things like a disabled car or a trip to an emergency room. Studies have also shown that affordable housing can contribute to health. People that don't reside in affordable housing, they don't have as much disposable income. So if they're sick, they may not go to get the proper health care or just the ongoing checkups and medical procedures that they may need as well. So you start seeing a decline, especially with the insurance costs today and the deductibles and so forth. So another big reason for it. The cost of affordable housing where people live, and many affordable housing options are far from the areas of where jobs are located. one of the results of this is a longer commute to work, and that also creates a higher expense for that person. So you maybe offer them a lower cost of living, but they're having to spend more, so they're right back up in terms of transportation costs or wear and tear on their vehicles. And also another component that people don't necessarily think about is the impacts that it has on a municipal road system and the wear and tear that it has there as well. So because of that, I mean, you know, just using Lee County as an example, in the past, we've heard, you know, nothing against Lehigh, but there's land out there, there's affordable, put it out there. And we said, well, again, there's some options out there. It's far from jobs. That mindset has changed a little bit with the Alico Road extension, because that's going to allow a little bit of an artery for people there. So we're starting to look a little bit into that market a little bit further now as well. Housing dictates the ability for employers to attract and retain superior workforce. When the cost of housing is out of reach for even the middle income workers, a region economic competitive edge is lost to communities that housing is attainable and accessible to jobs. So that's true. You know, if you don't have options, you talk to employers, are losing out on potential workforce because of the lack of affordable or workforce housing. So the National Coalition of Low Income Housing is they put out this report every year. It's called the Out of Reach Report or the GAP Report. So what they do is they take the fair market rent for each market, which is identified by HUD, and that's really the value of like Section 8 vouchers or whatever it may be, different subsidies that come along those lines. So they take that and they divide it by what it may be for renting a specific bedroom type. So nationally, it's a little over $28.50 an hour for a modest 2-bedroom and about $24 for a 1-bedroom unit. So that wage far exceeds the federal and also state minimum wage levels, and a large amount of median wages for workers are some of the country's most common occupancies. So you'll see in the graph there in yellow, that's what somebody would have to earn on an hourly basis, working every week for 40 hours a day. And then it exceeds the monthly rates for a lot of those common occupations. Again, from the same report, this first pie chart, it shows just how the 30%, the extremely low income households, are broken up. You can see that 36% of them are a part of the labor force, 30% are seniors. So a big population there as well. The middle chart is showing the amount of available housing units nationally for each of those income levels based off of 100 renters. So at 30% of the area median income nationally, there's 23 available units for every 100 tenants looking for a house. At 50% of the area median income, there's 33. And then if you jump to 80%, they're still feeling some pressure. It's at 71. The final chart also shows those different income levels, but it shows cost burden versus severely cost burden in orange. So you can see cost burden all the way up to 80% is pretty significant in terms of the percentages. As a part of the result report, Florida ranks 11th as the highest using the fair market rent, which every market has a different fair market rent. The wage from the report that was earlier this year is $11. It's now $12. But essentially, what they're saying is an individual that or a household that earns minimum wage, basically the 2.8 number there and the 2.3. 2.8 is for 2 bedrooms, and the 2.3 is for 1 bedrooms. Essentially, that means that a household at minimum wage has to work 2.8 jobs, almost 3 jobs, 52 weeks out of the year, 40 hours a day, no days off, to earn the fair market rents for that range, and market rents typically exceed that fair market rent as well. This is from the report. It just kind of breaks down the counties. This is a snip from that section. It shows Lee County here specifically, because that was previously that was for the state of Florida. Lee County is a little bit different. It shows right here for a 1 two bedroom is 2.5 jobs as well, based off the Lee County fair market rent. So in Lee County, in 2023, the area median income is $85,900. And that's released annually, typically every April from the federal government, from HUD, and it's based off of a household of 4. AMI, which you'll see often as well, I may say that as well, that just means area median income. Breaking down that area median income for a family of 4, to be within 30%, it's about $2,150 on rent is what they need to spend on rent to be affordable. So once you go below that median income level, I mean, that's pretty much average market rent right now in Lee County. Oh, sorry, if you can back up just a little bit, I'm sorry. So in some of the numbers we received from the county, and based a lot of the data often lags. So this is 2021. So there was about 320,000 households in Lee County. Of that, almost 100,000 of them were considered cost burden. So just over 30% of the households. The income restrictions we talked about, a little over 31,000 are within that level of 30% of the area median income or below. So nearly 10% of the households, 40,000 or 50% or below. So 30 to 50% area median income. So about 22% or 0 to 50%. 80% of the area median income or below. It's a pretty high number as well. It's about 40% of the households. So that's pretty significant as well. And then if you add in, just go up to 100% of the area median income, which is what I consider the cap for workforce, at least from our perspective, you're just exceeding 50% of the households in Lee County. So just to show a little bit of the demand, as you guys all know, where the housing is high demand here in Lee County. This is from a May 2023 report, a market study, a housing needs study from Reinhold Wolf that was provided for the city of Cape Coral. They said in surveying 67 market rate properties, which consists of over nearly 17,000 units, there was a vacancy rate of about 2%. That was down. That means, you know, there's no vacancy. Basically, all the units are pretty much 100% occupied. The only vacancy is because they're moving out. The turnover is what's throwing that number up there. That vacancy rent went all the way up to 15% during the economic recession, but over the past 10 years, the vacancy rate in Lee County hasn't exceeded 5%, which is pretty impressive in terms of market demand. When you go down to low income developments here in Lee County, and the market study surveying about 4,000 units of multifamily rental properties, the vacancy rent is less than 0.5%. So those units, once there's high demand, for us, we have a 0 tolerance policy as well, and the tenants often they want to stay in those properties as long term, so they know what options are there. If they get evicted, they don't make their payments, or they do something that's going to require them to be removed from the property. So within that same report, going from May of 2017 to May of 2023, the average rent increased nearly 15% on an annual basis, with the exception of 2019 to 2020, a little bit of a dip to 6% due to COVID. But over the past year, closer to that 10% mark, a little over 9%. But you can see it's pretty consistent amongst different unit types, the 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedroom units. Again, continuing from that report and what they provided, they're showing for the next 3 years, from 2023 to 2026, the need for multifamily units for those specific income demographics. So 30% or below, they're saying that the market needs 211 units annually to maintain the demand. Very low is 205 and low is 276. So for 80% of the median income and below, nearly 700 units or so is what's required to meet the current demand, and that's difficult to accomplish, but we're working our way towards there. Um, so some of this information is from the report and some is from HUD, but I wanted to put this together so you guys had an understanding in terms of like what I was talking about with the 120%, but also seeing what some common area median income levels are. So of those 67 developments that were surveyed, you see in that first column there, that's the average market rent for those units. The weighted average is just under $21,000 or $2,100 a month. According to Lee County and some of the data we received in September, was a little over 2,200 a month as well. So you can see just since May, it's going up as well. The next column, the wider column there, is just from 7 recently completed or fully occupied and stabilized or currently in lease up. You can see kind of that range of market rate units. And then the next section shows those different area median income levels as well per unit type. So studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and so forth. So at 30% of the area median income in Lee County, to maintain that 30% of affordability, the rent for a 1 bedroom is $478 for a 30% area median income household when the market rate is $1,847. So it goes up to the 50% AMI for a 1 bedroom is nearly $800. And the market rent is more than double that. At 80% gets a little bit closer, but still significantly under. And then you'll see on a 1 bedroom at 120% goes to my point of what I was talking about is it's about $1,900. So it actually exceeds market rate based off this report for a 1 bedroom unit in Lee County. So we deal with many headwinds, many barriers in trying to develop affordable housing, not just in Lee County, but nationally as well. Some of the issues we're facing, one of the biggest issues we face is the rising cost of land, construction, and operating costs. Especially over, 24 months ago, we really got hit pretty hard with inflation. So we were having costs of construction going up over 30%. These developments take a long time to put together in terms of the financing, getting the permits and everything put together. So it's tough to offset those because you can't speed the process up. You just got to absorb it. So which just makes you have to come up with creative alternatives to combat those. But we're also facing some significant insurance hikes right now. Our insurance rates are up about 300%. And again, we have minimum income to offset that as well. So that plus labor costs of our management, amongst other things, and rising interest rates drives down the debt that we can get on our property and increases the funding gap that we have to make a project feasible. Not enough funding available. So Florida and nationally, there's several funding programs that are available for low income housing, affordable housing, 80% or below. As I mentioned, we work with low income housing tax credits, but there's also different subsidies as well. There's certainly more demand than there's funding available. But when you go to that workforce or attainable housing, a lot of those individuals or households don't qualify, which is why they're often referred to as the missing middle. So there's minimal programs available up until recently with Senate Bill 102 Live Local Act was passed. So now we have a couple of options that can help that demographic that we're seeing. It's still earlier, just went effective July 1st. So we'll see in time if that's really an effective program. But the belief is that it will really be impactful. Oh, okay. Yes.
while we're waiting. Yeah, I have a question while we're waiting. You, earlier on, you talked about transportation issues and that being a big barrier. Are there any plans in Florida to combine affordable housing with affordable transportation?
So transit oriented communities are common. I mean, it's a common theme where put them close to public transportation, if you will, like so train station, rails, bus stops. We always look for sites that are close to community services, and one of those items is public transportation and bus routes. So yes, but it is still difficult. Yes.
Hi, a lot of people here don't know me. I'm from League of Women Voters, Collier County. So I wanted to support what you said about the effect of affordable housing on the neighbors. And as I was transitioning to Florida, somebody donated land in my neighborhood. And so it made possible workforce housing. And there were a lot of objections because there wasn't enough space for parking. So the solution ended up being building fewer units, fewer larger units. So all we have in this building, it's within a quarter mile of the house that my son lives in now, is 2 and 3 bedroom units with lots of families. And I can guarantee you it has had no impact whatsoever on the appreciation of those single family, very wealthy houses. So let's clap for that.
Thank you, baby. Thank you. Is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
The relationship to the resiliency plan at Lee County, but the dollars that are to come are here. Is any of this involved in the planning?
So any of our projects right now, I mean, we're planning projects to propose the use of those funds. But the county hasn't put out a solicitation for it. Right now, they're working with HUD. They have their action plan that's put together. The CDBG DR disaster recovery funds, to meet those requirements on like a multifamily rental component, for example, it's at least 51% of the units have to target 80% of the median income or below, and then the balance, the 49% can be whatever, it could be market rate. So that is that's the specific federal guideline. So whatever the county decides to do in terms of their selections on the projects that are proposed to them will be up to them. But that we'll be planning some projects to utilize those funds with or without utilizing low income housing tax credits. Okay.
Hi, Tom Halt from, I'm a member of Life Organization. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Recently, we fought and won some affordable housing in the area of the old News Press location. First of all, are you familiar with Jonathan Vilma?
I know of him as the football player and what he's proposing here. So,
yeah, he's done much for affordable housing. And I just wanted to let everybody know that the pressure on city council does work, because we arrived with a whole ton of people.
Mm-hmm.
And people, when you don't have money and you have people, that helps. And we showed up there in mass, and the vote finally was 5-2 in favor of Jonathan Vilma as opposed to luxury condos.
Yeah.
So it does work.
That's great. And it's glad to see you guys coming out as a group as well, because often more frequently is the opposite. It's the ones that are against the projects that come out in large groups. So that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I think we got like just a couple more quick slides.
Yes, I applaud what Tom said because I'm going to all these meetings and I see Tom there and that. My thing is, we got a lot of people on the streets. They do have limited income. As you're saying, there's people only getting 700, there's people getting 1,000, they're on fixed income. My thing is, where are people going to stay until we get this affordable building? My solution, I approached the chief of police, was you got a labor pool right down across the street here. You got people coming on Greyhound, is to take the building and make a youth hostel out of the office building on Union Street, just to get people, some of them off the street. And there's other places that could be kind of rehabbed until apartments are available. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I can't say that I have the answer to it because that's beyond our scope. So I think a lot of that falls on just other organizations that focus on it, whether it's nonprofits, and they often get the assistance or funding assistance from the local municipalities as well. But we have a couple of projects in Lee County, but there's also different demographics within those income limits, and supportive housing for individuals or households that are previously experienced homelessness is something we're currently working on, as well as disabling conditions and family and seniors. So there's a whole big need out there. So yes. Okay.
For the sake of time,
I'll do whatever you guys want.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're almost done. So barriers, I think we talked about the first two. So zoning and land use regulations and the lengthy development approval process, that's very difficult. So the funding that we often seek is highly competitive, statewide, sometimes federal, but it is like the low-income housing tax credits, for example, is a highly competitive statewide competition. So we often try to find land that is already zoned for multifamily. In fact, you need that to apply. So there's a big risk, and there's certain scoring components. So if you go through to tie up some land or own some land and go through the rezoning process, and it takes you a year and a half, by the time that next funding cycle comes around, that perfect site that checked all the boxes may not check all those boxes anymore. So we try to focus on the sites that are already zoned, and that's, they're getting scooped up, or we're competing with the market rate developers that can pay a higher price point, or they can get more aggressive with their loan terms because we're contingent upon getting some federal funds as well. So that's some of the competition that we're up against as well. But again, with Senate Bill 102, it kind of opens us up to focus on some additional properties that are zoned commercial, mixed use, or industrial as well. So we're working on that. Another one of the big objections is what we talked about is not in my backyard, the NIMBYs, or NIMBYism as it's often referred. They typically come out the opposite of life, and they come out in these big groups and they oppose a project. We have a project in Cape Coral, for example, that they'll try to do anything to stop it. We had a groundbreaking event earlier this year. We got a lot of media coverage from it. And next thing you know, we got Fish and Wildlife called on us, and somebody put a gopher tortoise on our site to try to stop it. And yeah, I mean, it sounds funny, but it didn't do anything to our development. It probably hurt the turtle, taking him out of his habitat. So it's a little ridiculous. Or on North Fort Myers, we had our company sign there, kind of like a coming soon, and somebody called FDOT. So they found this little loophole in the regulations that because we're in contract, we don't own it. We had to take our sign down. So we took the sign down last week because it had affordable housing referenced on it. So it's ridiculous. We're always facing some type of objection somewhere. So next slide, please. So some, but not all the solutions that are here in Lee County, expedited permit process and fee waiver. I could say, I mean, we're definitely experiencing that in unincorporated Lee County. They've been great in terms of working with, in terms of, they have a backlog. They have a lot of other priorities in terms of hurricane recovery. They're overwhelmed, but our project that we have in development, they know the impacts of it as well. And they're also pushing that through the process. So it's been fantastic to see and get their support as well. Senate Bill 102, the Live Local Act, specifically for the zoning and density, in our North Fort Myers development, we were getting affordable housing density plus some transformative development units, which would, there's a cost involved with them. And for what we were looking for, it was a little over $500,000. So that's what we had planned in our pro forma. And until Senate Bill 102 came out and talking to the county, and they worked with us there. They got us the density that we were able to do that conforms with 102 and no longer need the need to acquire those units. So it saves us about $500,000 on our development, which is great. Ad valorem tax an abatement or tax increment financing, which you often see here in the city of Fort Myers, is also referred to as a TIF. That's great and beneficial as well. Deferral or waiver of impact fees or permitting fees. Those can get pretty expensive for an affordable development and add significant costs. So when they're able to reduce or waive or defer them in a loan, that's certainly helpful as well. Funding subsidies, probably no time more important than what we're going through right now over the past couple of years with the funding gaps that we're experiencing and the cost of inflation and the local governments that we've worked with, Lee County, City of Cape Coral. They've been fantastic in helping us out and kind of getting what's needed to get the projects over the finish line, and that's what we're referring to with the CDBG disaster recovery funds as well. We're hoping to use those, so we're competing on a local level as opposed to a state level. Deviations to help on reductions of costs or provide like a more efficient design. Like unincorporated Lee County, for example, has a pretty heavy parking requirement. So if they can come off of that for units on like 1 bedrooms, or just be open-minded to the fact that the demographic may use public transportation or may not have the amount of vehicles, that's also a cost-saving approach as well. But certainly we don't want to underpark the properties. And then high level of support, which is extremely important. Like I said, every market has a need for affordable housing. So what kind of helps us as developers and going into the market is knowing that we're going to get the support from the local government and stakeholders as well. Because there's several markets that we can go into. We get a lot of pushback and don't have the assistance. So it's great to have the assistance and support of the local community as well that wants us to deliver the product, work here, and continue to work here for the long term as well. Okay, so these are just a couple of the renderings of some of the projects that we're working on. This is in Cape Coral on Pine Island Road between like Sam's Club and Walmart. It's 96 units of affordable and workforce units. It's 96 units, and they're broken down with the demographics there as well, as you'll see. It's all like everything we build is concrete block, plank, designed for green energy certification as well. So you'll see that. This is 3-story buildings, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We have a clubhouse, pretty massive clubhouse for an affordable community. It's about 6,000 square feet with a swimming pool. So I think we have more on the next page as well. Cape Coral. Pine Island Road between Sam's and Walmart. Right in there. You'll see it's got minimal, it's a long and narrow site, so it's got minimal frontage on Pine Island, but you'll see it's under construction. We're hoping to have the first building open in April. But this is an example. So we won a statewide competition for CDBG disaster recovery funds for Hurricane Irma. So when it doesn't come to the county, there's, it's a slow process in itself, but you don't get that direct subsidy, and it goes through different levels in the state. Irma was, 5+ years ago, and we're looking to deliver the first building in April of this year. So we were awarded initially, I think, like $5.6 million from the state of Florida, and they increased that by about $4.4 million to help offset inflation. We have about $14 million of low-income housing tax credits, which was syndicated by Raymond James. And then the city of Cape Coral, through some of their state and federal programs, they contribute an additional $900,000. And Lee County almost $2 million in federal funds, and also their local housing trust fund of about $1.5 million on a low interest loan. This is our next project in North Fort Myers. This is the one I referenced is currently in permitting. We're looking to break ground in March or April of this year. It's going to be a 2-phase project. Earlier this year, we won, which is probably the most coveted award, which is called a 9% low-income housing tax credit from the state of Florida. It was helpful because we got support from Lee County in this competitive process. They give a preference if you can get local contribution of $460,000 or more, and they support just one project. They supported ours. And if you don't get funding, you come back, you get the same support, you get a more of a preference, and narrows the pool down. So we won that this most recent year, and that's been helpful to get this project going. It's 72 units, all 60% area median income and below for seniors aged 42 and above, all 1 and 2 bedrooms, elevators, clubhouse, concrete, block and plank. And this will be phase 2, an additional 88 units. So we also won another statewide award through what's called the State Apartment Initiative Loan Program for 88 units just earlier this year, a couple months ago, as a matter of fact. So that's phase 2. So it'll be a total of 160 units between the 2 phases. Again, 60% of the area median income and below. This time we're setting the low incomes at 40%, and we're providing a preference to veterans. And then this is one we're doing in Arcadia, just to show an example of something you could do on a smaller site. It's 2-story. I think the site's just under 2 acres, like 1.89, with about 1.5 usable space. Doesn't necessarily have all the amenities as the other one as well, but it's got 27 affordable 3-bedroom units right across the street from a high school. So good location for families at 65% and 50% of the area median income and below. So that's it. So if anybody has any other questions, happy to field them.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Just real quick. There's a mic.
Yeah. I would, you want to?
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Yes, I had a question. I heard you mention industrial zoning for potentially putting these affordable housing. And we know that, you know, industrial zoning can create environmental justice issues, bring pollution into residential areas. If you could address that, I would appreciate it. I also have a question about the designs where we have so much parking area, the permeable surfaces. Whereas, you know, working with some integrated parking, just addressing that. And then the third question I have is about with the seniors and the multi-level, you know, how they're accessing those multi-floors. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So with regards to industrial or even commercial, for example, or even anything that's zone multifamily, that's what we can do and develop by right as per Senate Bill 102. It still goes into consideration our site selection as well. So we're not going to, at least our firm, I can't speak on behalf of others, we're not going to develop housing right in the middle of an industrial park where it's surrounded by other industrial properties as well. So that's one thing. And then there's other, in terms of like environmental requirements, we often deal with federal funds, which is one of the things they're going to have to be mindful of. Other developers with the CDBG DR funds as well. They got very strict environmental requirements as well, like on Cape Coral, for example, to the point we had that the neighbor that wasn't even involved with our property, they had an above ground storage tank of old motor oil that we had to either upgrade to like $100,000 for this encapsulated tank or get them to remove it. And thankfully they moved it on their own. But it goes pretty depth into those requirements, plus phase 1 environmental reports and so forth. So that's important. And then with regards to parking, yeah, I mean, we want to have green space. That's one of the things we want to have. And it goes back to what I was saying with North Fort Myers and unincorporated Lee County. I mean, they're 2 units per space, regardless of unit type. Certainly don't need that. So we're more overparked than what's needed. The problem with it as well is just it takes time to go through that deviation process, like 6 to 9 months. And once we receive a funding award, we're under a lot of pressure from the state and federal government to get the projects built and delivered that we don't necessarily have time to go in and get those. So getting those deviations like on an administrative level would be great, because that would allow us to do that and build, again, more efficient. And then what was your last question? I'm sorry. Oh, right. So we have so if like on Cape Coral, it's 3-story walk up, no elevators as an example, and we have 88 units, but they're all on the ground floor, and everything else is going to be adaptable for handicap adaptable. In North Fort Myers, we have elevators, so they'll have access to them, elevators for all floors, roll-in showers for anybody that needs them. So a certain amount of units for those as well. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much. I know that we have a lot more questions, and we definitely want to take the opportunity to address them. However, we're running short on time. We want to give our other speaker an opportunity to share from the Florida Housing Coalition. However, if you'd like to jot down your questions, You can also email them to us as well at the League of Women Voters, and we will be sure to submit them over to Michael, or at least try to get some answers for you, because I'm pretty sure all of us have some of the same questions. So I appreciate your participation in this. And why don't we give Michael a hand of applause?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I can stick around at the end as well if anybody has other questions. So happy
Absolutely.
to do so. And if needed for Zoom, this is low battery.
Great. I'll plug it in. Thank you. What we're going to do is have a small intermission. We're going to switch over and get Ali from the Florida Housing Coalition. In the meantime, you guys can kind of ask some questions of Michael, use the restroom, or get a little bit of a coffee break. But about 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, we'll be right back up and running.
I think that's like one thing. Yeah, there's one thing. What we want me to do, sorry.
I gotta see where to plug this in. I just want to make sure that I get, that this gets the opportunity.
My laptop.
This is not, you don't know how to do this?
No, we don't.
He said that was running low. Those usually have
No, it's
9.
not. It's my laptop that's running low.
Oh, well, where do you want me to plug it in at?
It's right there.
Okay. Just the fact is that there's a big preference for home ownership versus rental. Like for the SHIP program, 65% has to go to home ownership. So the rental, you're competing with 35%. And we couldn't even get like 65,000 out of it. Lee County listening to try one unit. It's because of the because of the competition there regarding the things. So this is good. Well, first of all, most of these things are, you have to have over like 60 units for the federal and all these other, well, for all these other programs. So if you have a smaller development there, you're out of luck for about probably most of well, that's what you're done with these big numbers. You have, they got they have the resources, but like the tax credits. If you have a smaller thing, you don't have the ability for for tax credit. You gotta rely on, well, we're trying to maybe get, maybe perhaps that apply for a grant for the Schultz Foundation, but that's a sort of, that's pretty much the whole thing you gotta deal with. So otherwise you can't do anything with the thing, or just try to save up. Yeah, look, for small developments, it's like impossible to get things. And also too, when you're talking about this NIMBY, perhaps you almost have to go to less democracy and get things out at the state level. Because if you go to these meetings that talks about the future of the community, you get the people that are already vested in the community. They want open space, they want parks, they don't want housing. So these are, and the state requires that they have these meetings, so often, every couple of years. So this is the input that goes into it. So it almost has to be at the higher level, the state mandating that you have this, so you get away from all the public meetings, which are slow down development. Like you said, it takes like a year and a half or something like that. You're already locked out of the possibility of getting the development. So, yeah, well, less democracy may be needed.
Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll be back. Yeah, we're. I've had apartments.
Hi, good afternoon. Well, good morning. Not afternoon yet.
All right, is that Allan?
Can you all hear me okay?
Why do I get all the net cases?
I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah. Nonprofit housing. It's great.
Excuse me, I switched up.
Because I'm just slightly housing is the first place where you get to know that, housing is the time.
I'll see him soon. I don't know if this county is built, as I do know. You know, it's just driving down to this county. But I believe the picture. You know, like, it's now 70% market. All, you don't want to go like. Okay, Judy.
Yeah, well, it's.
How do you roll this?
Well,
I have to get.
I don't know, all I was saying. There has to be, you know, I'm just thinking that we gotta get rid of a lot of zoning restrictions. That's, you know, that's also too, they didn't mention things about the things that are gonna build, also too, about the zoning. We didn't mention.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, if you hear me, please raise your hand and snap. I learned this from my grandkids' elementary school. We are preparing to begin, and I just like to make sure everyone gets a chance to get settled in. She got it. Okay. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to move forward, and I would like to introduce you, and I'm going to apologize first, but I'm going to do my very best, Ali, with your last name. I'd like to introduce you to Ali Ankudowich. How does that sound?
Ankudowich.
She is from the Florida Housing Coalition, and she is a land use and planning technical advisor with the Florida Housing Coalition. Previously, Miss Ali was a senior planning was a senior planner with the Beniche Tampa office, which she specialized in comprehensive plans and land development, development code amendments, and conducted research and policy analysis, outreach, communications related to development, affordable housing, comprehensive plans, and transportation. What Ali will do with us today is just try to give you a little bit of background as to what the Florida Housing Coalition, which is all over Florida, of course, is doing to address the housing issues and what policies and procedures that they are working on and everything that they can do to assist all of our developers, our leadership here locally, as well as all around this around Florida to move forward with affordable housing. Ali, I'll give you the mic.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, but it may cut my video and I'll come back afterwards for questions. So let me make sure that this is coming back properly. And I will. Okay, great. So I think it's coming through now. Again, a big thanks to the League of Women Voters of Lee County to putting on this this workshop this morning on such an important topic. And thank you to you all who shared your Saturday morning with us. I know we're running a little behind on time, so I might condense my presentation a little bit. And you may experience it like, oh my gosh, Ali, I feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. But I really want to, my main goal here is to give you the full scope of all the ways that folks are trying to tackle the problem of affordability. And we have plenty of resources to take a deeper dive into any of the topics we're talking about today. And so I'll share a few of those, and you can find even more on the Florida Housing Coalition website. If there are any really burning questions that we don't get to today, I'm happy to do a quick follow-up via email. So we have plenty of resources and kind of just want to give you almost like the overview of overviews of everything that's kind of going on locally and how that might impact the work of housing affordability. So if you're not familiar with the Florida Housing Coalition, we are a statewide nonprofit. We primarily provide training and technical assistance to local governments and nonprofits who build affordable housing on everything related to affordable housing. So you'll see some of our work there. But another big part of our work is making sure that we are creating partnerships with all of the stakeholders and everybody who has an interest in affordable housing and housing in general, and expanding that tent. So that's just one more reason why I'm really excited to be here with you all today. So as I said, I'm going to be covering a lot of different topics today, and I've kind of boiled them down into 5 different solution areas. And honestly, the coalition has a team dedicated to almost every single one of these areas, and sometimes multiple teams. So that just gives you an idea of the level of detail in terms of some of the rules and administration of these different strategies, and just some of the implementation considerations. So again, it's going to be pretty high level. I am going to cover some of the impacts from the Live Local Act that Michael mentioned earlier, and just kind of show where that ties into these different solution categories. And I've also taken a quick crack at trying to show what's already happening locally and also provide some examples of how these types of strategies are being used elsewhere. And I'm sure Michael can kind of chime in on some of the more specifics for Lee County having developed here. So just a quick word on that Live Local Act that was passed earlier this year. This was a 95-page bill, so it was a huge amount of housing legislation that was passed. Again, I've boiled it down into a handful of strategies that were retained, beefed up, added to help tackle housing affordability. And the 4 you see highlighted there are going to tie into these solution areas we're going to be talking about today. One thing I will note is that this act did remove the ability to do local rent control. And there was also HB 1417 that restricted some of the local actions for certain tenant protections. That was rent control was pretty limited already because there were some limited circumstances in which that could be used, and had really only been used once in 2022 since it has been on the books. So this kind of highlights what tools and strategies were really promoted by this act. And we've already talked about income limits and thresholds. Michael did a great job with that, but this just gives you a little insight into how the sausage is made and all the different limits that are looked at between a percentage of area median income and how that's adjusted by household size. So this is all comes from the federal government and is posted with our state housing funding agency, the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. So I won't dwell on that any further because we've done a great job of covering that already. So just a note on the funding. So with this, I really want to talk about what kinds of resources are coming into the local area and what are those intervention points? How is it decided how those funds are used? So first, just starting with federal funding highlights, and this is really just focusing on what are the formula grant programs. So these sort of entitlement programs where there's money coming into Lee County and Fort Myers for some of these major federal programs. We have the Community Development Block Grant Program. That can be used for a number of community development activities, including moderate and low-income housing. We have the Home Investment Partnership. We have the Emergency Solutions Grant. And so that is primarily to address homelessness. That's kind of the focus for that grant. I know that came up earlier. And then home focuses on affordable housing for low-income households. So you'll see some of the numbers there that are coming in. And the way that the use of these funds is determined is through a 5-year consolidated plan. So the jurisdictions who get this money are updating this consolidated plan every year. It has a boatload of data in it about the local housing situation, demographics, fair housing, and then there's these annual action plans that kind of provide the annual update. So that's a great way, if there's outreach happening around a consolidated plan update, to get more information about how this sort of money is used. Moving on to state funding sources. So some of these were already referenced in Michael's presentation. So just a quick overview. What were called the Sadowski Trust Funds were established back in the 90s. There's a state housing trust fund. There's a local housing trust fund. And these fund the two big state affordable housing funding programs, the State Apartment Incentive Loan, the SALE program, and the State Housing Initiatives Partnership, the SHIP program. And so these are funded through documentary stamp tax revenues that come from real estate transactions. So when you have a hotter market, you're getting more revenues. And when the market cools off, you're getting less revenue. And even with all of this money coming into the trust funds, that money still has to be appropriated each year by the legislature to the actual housing programs where that money is going to be used. And so a quick note on SALE, this is the main affordable housing rental program. Michael referenced it for a prior project that they were working on, primarily serving households at 60% of the area median income. And then a word on SHIP. So this is the other housing program. This is primarily focused on low income home ownership. So that's where a lot of these funds need to go. At least 65% of these funds need to be spent on home ownership activities, and at least 60% of these need to be assisting low income households, and half of that needs to go to very low income households. So we have kind of a more rental program that's competitive and developers are going after those dollars. And then we have this home ownership SHIP program. And this is administered through what's called a local housing assistance plan that is updated every 3 years. So there is an affordable housing advisory committee that helps update that plan. And so that's another way to find out how these funds are being used. So a word on the Live Local Act. I'm not going to break down every single piece of this, but this just gives you an idea of the additional funding that came through with this Live Local Act. For starters, these two programs that I just talked about got fully funded through the Live Local Act. And you'll see that those numbers have increased since over the past couple of years in terms of the appropriations to them. And then in addition to this, we had the pledge of $150 million a year for 10 years for a program very like SAIL, so for rental development. We had the Hometown Heroes program that was focused on first-time homebuyer purchase assistance. The dollars that were appropriated there have already been spoken for, and there's some activity to look at, perhaps even adding more money to that because it was so successful. Michael talked about some of the slowdowns due to rising construction costs with projects. There was an inflation response program to help address that issue. And there's even a new tax donation program for businesses that have corporate and insurance premium tax liabilities. They can donate money and get tax relief for that. And that also goes to the SAIL program. So again, providing some resources for rental development. And so really quickly, I'm going to talk about how this breaks down because we are very excited about the amount of state funding that was provided through the Live Local Act. And then there's the step of breaking that up across all of the jurisdictions and the developers who can take advantage of that. So a word on how SAIL funding works. There's pots of money that are kind of set aside for different sizes of counties, small, medium, and large. Lee County is in that medium county category. So developers among 29 of these medium counties, including Lee County, are applying with their projects to take advantage of that money. So you see there, that's about $58 million. And then the breakdown on SHIP, you can kind of see how and so this would be for Lee County and all of the municipalities, including Fort Myers, SHIP money, kind of combined. So you can see how the Live Local Act and appropriations affected that. So it was a little under 7.5 million the year prior, and now it's a little over $9 million coming in. So again, it's great to have all this money, and we still need all of those other funding sources and local funding and activity to help get us where we need to be once that money's kind of distributed amongst everybody who's going to use it or apply for it. And then one other source of funding I want to note, and thanks to the League of Women Voters of Lee County for attaching some additional information on this, and this has already been mentioned a bit by Michael, but there's some additional money coming in that is unfortunately due to the occurrence of hurricanes in the area, namely Hurricane Ian. So just noting here that Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery funding that came in at a little over $1 billion. 660 million of that was proposed to be allocated to housing based on the action plan that was shared through the press release. So that's another thing you can take a look at if you want more information. The state also has what's called the Hurricane Housing Recovery Program. And so due to Hurricane Ian, there was some additional money that came through to Lee County and Fort Myers there as well. And that can help with housing. So as I mentioned, the local activity is still really important for promoting and getting us where we need to be. And locally, there's some really great activity happening already. So I just want to highlight a couple of those things. Fort Myers created the Local Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And so thanks to all the stakeholders and activities that made that a reality. And so this collects local funding from a variety of sources. That's all spelled out in an ordinance. And that's going to be providing affordable housing and supporting affordability for folks at that area median income level. And then also there's what's called community redevelopment areas. So this is a tool that's authorized in state law. You can define a target redevelopment area. And what it does is it takes a portion of property taxes and just helps reinvest those back into that area. And housing is one way that those investments can be used. And so that is all spelled out in a redevelopment plan for each of these areas. Those are all posted on the internet. And so Fort Myers has a great housing infill program associated with these redevelopment areas. Here's a couple other options that are happening around the state. Bonds are often a popular choice just to inject money and kind of promise future revenues to help pay for affordable housing needs. And one example of that is just last year, Palm Beach County passed a bond for $200 million to support affordable housing. And so with these general obligation bonds, those do need to go through a referendum and be voter approved. Likewise with the local government infrastructure surtax. So this is an option also authorized in state law to levy a sales tax that can support land acquisition for affordable housing, among other uses such as infrastructure. Pinellas County, Collier County, Palm Beach County, Alachua County just passed one. So this is another way to fund land for affordable housing and some other supportive activities for affordable housing. Speaking of land, so I'm going to move on to the next bucket of strategies that are kind of focused on land. Publicly owned land is a big focus because having control of that land to actually know where to put housing and have a place to put it is really important. And a lot of developers spend time finding suitable sites to do that. So Florida actually already has what are called the surplus land laws. So every city and county has to create an inventory and update it every 3 years to identify publicly owned lands that are, quote, appropriate for use as affordable housing. And the thing has always been, well, what does that mean exactly? And that term has never been clearly spelled out in state law. So there's some discretion there for local governments to determine what that inventory will contain. And that's a great advocacy point and point to get involved and learn more, to understand how that determination is made and make sure that there are plenty of options as much as possible for publicly owned lands that can be identified as appropriate for use as affordable housing. So what the Live Local Act did in terms of changing this is there were more publicly owned lands to consider for inclusion in this inventory. These inventories now need to be posted on the local government website, so there's more transparency around that, and those are easier to find. And then it encourages even further transparency in terms of how those lands can be used and developed for affordable housing, and also promoting long-term affordability. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on the different tools that are out there to promote long-term affordability. You might have heard of community land trusts. There's some other tools out there, but I do have a resource on surplus lands that's going to be linked at the end of this presentation, which can tell you all about that. Here's a cool highlight of publicly owned land from Pasco County. They're working with some surplus land that the Pasco County School Board has to develop affordable housing. They had to go through a land use change together. It's going to be serving 100% at or below 60% area median income. So that's some pretty deep affordability that we're getting there. And it's going to have great access to public schools and other community resources. So kind of touching on that transportation piece that came up earlier. Land development regulations. So we talked a bit about this with Michael, but of course, there's all these regulations that developers have to meet through the Code of Ordinances, the zoning code. This is all consistent with what's called a comprehensive plan, which has higher level policies that lay out growth and capital improvements and how that's going to go down. And so developers have to comply with these rules, right? And when these rules are stringent, it can make it more difficult to build housing. And so one strategy is to look at how stringent those rules are. Do we really need to require this high of a minimum amount of parking on site? Do we need to have such a large open space requirement on site? Could we up the density and perhaps allow, maybe allow some housing types too, like a triplex? And so this is all really determined by that zoning code. And I want to note here that the aim is not to just really strip down the quality of the housing, but there may be other ways of meeting those needs. So for instance, if you're in a more compact area with a mix of uses, you may be able to have some shared parking between residential and commercial, or maybe you have parking on the street that can help meet some of that need, so you don't have to put as many spaces on site. Maybe you have a great public parks plan so that you don't need individual pieces of open space on every single site. So just thinking about different ways to meet those needs that are more perhaps shared and can facilitate more buildable land and lower costs for actually building housing. So here's just a few different housing types that could be enabled through your zoning in terms of explicitly allowing these types, and also the dimensional and zoning regulations that would help facilitate that. And I've included a couple highlights here. Lee County, a couple bonus density programs, so getting some additional bonus density for providing affordable housing or contributing to community benefits that might include affordable housing, allowing accessory apartments and accessory dwelling units, mixed use overlay that can provide some more flexibility on these regulations, and where you have single family, if you do retain a single family, at least allowing some flexibility in terms of setbacks and things like that. And that might be an opportunity to look at, could we allow duplexes in certain areas, or triplexes, or some smaller multifamily? So just some examples of where you see flexibility like this. Now, this was already mentioned by Michael, the Live Local Act. So this act did introduce some new standards for eligible affordable housing development related to use, density, and height. So these apply to rental projects in commercial, industrial, or mixed-use zones, where at least 40% of units are affordable up to 120% AMI for at least 30 years. And there's some additional conditions there for mixed use. So just a note here that all other state and local laws do apply. So floodplain regulations, parking requirements, setbacks, all of this is going to influence how this is used. So to Michael's point earlier, we'll see how much developers can take advantage of it. A couple of examples in Hillsborough County and Miami Beach. Just kind of noting a couple of financial incentives. I see we're at 11 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up in just a couple minutes here. As Michael mentioned, there's a lot of fees that are charged to developments, and this can make affordable housing more expensive. I've listed a few types of fees here, and many of these fees are mentioned in the local housing assistance plan as having some sort of incentive to help facilitate housing in certain areas, or affordable housing more specifically. There's a couple new property tax exemptions introduced by the Live Local Act. One has to be adopted by the local government and can help serve those lower income thresholds at 60% AMI. And then there's a couple additional ones that don't require any local action that you see listed there. Land owned by a nonprofit used for affordable housing, and the missing middle property tax exemption that serves a higher income level at 120% AMI. So a couple more things to sweeten the pot. And lastly, just wanted to highlight some construction techniques, specifically factory built housing. There's some distinctions here between manufactured home, mobile homes, and modular homes. The main one I just want to highlight here, manufactured homes are typically built in a factory after June 15th, 1976. They do meet HUD's federal building code for manufactured homes. So there is that code there to make sure they're safe and habitable and all that jazz. Modular homes are built to the actual state building codes where they're going to be used, and they typically are a little bit more expensive. So just some distinctions there in terms of types. And here's a couple benefits of it. The main one I want to highlight is just that it's a lot less expensive to build manufactured home than a site-built, stick-built home. So you'll see some of the other benefits there. And that's a great thing to make sure is allowed widely through your zoning code. If you have homeowners association rules, making sure there's no limitations there, and just kind of getting the word out to promote this type of construction. Again, here's some additional resources. I know this was kind of a whirlwind, but we have lots of additional information on any of these, and I've linked several of them here. You can also check out our website for more information. So thank you. And if we do have time for questions, happy to stick around a few more minutes, or please feel free to email any questions you have.
I really enjoyed both presentations. It was very interesting and certainly informative. But the thing that was not addressed that I'm curious about is, you know, when you're in a house or an apartment, you have utility bills. And this is a huge stressor for a lot of people who are very low income. And I was wondering if there was anything attached to that issue of utilities that's also addressed with affordable housing. And what I'm more concerned about is, are we missing an opportunity for solar energy to get rid of fossil fuel issues? And I'm sure that somebody's breathing down the throat of FPL on that. But my second question is, are there issues that conflict with the conservation of land and affordable housing? And how is anybody addressing that?
Great questions. And I don't know if Michael's still around, but I'm happy to speak to this a little bit. So inclusion of utilities in the affordability can depend on the program if you're dealing with a subsidy program for affordable housing. But one other way of looking at this is that in making housing generally more affordable, it, you know, since money is fungible, right? It can make it easier to afford other things where there might not be a direct subsidy there. So that's kind of a general approach to that as well. Is, you know, if we're making housing more affordable, to the point earlier, if we're considering transportation options that are also affordable and increasing access to places people need to go with more affordable transportation options, being able to walk, bike, things like that, then it can make some of these other costs kind of also easier to pay for as well. So just kind of wanted to note that there. Also, to the point on conservation land and affordable housing, I think that this actually gets to the access and kind of growth management and development regulations as well. So I think when you are, so we have the comprehensive plan, that's kind of this big growth management exercise that every city and county goes through because they all have a comprehensive plan. So that's exactly the sort of questions that they're looking at when they update that plan is, where are we preserving land? Where are we developing? What kind of infrastructure do we need to support that? How are people going to have access to the places they need to go? There's a land use element, there's a transportation element, there's a utilities element, there's a parks and open space element. So it kind of gets at all of those questions. And so I think that's an opportunity to say, hey, you know, like if we do kind of target our growth in a more compact way and allow more housing types and allow a little bit more density, you know, even just allowing a duplex on a site might require more density than you think, right? That can kind of also speak to these aims of conservation, preservation. And if lands have been designated for those uses, oftentimes they're not going to be up for looking at development, right? So oftentimes that's one of the first things you're looking at is kind of what land is already in preservation or conservation where we're not developing, and what can we do with the remaining land there. And that has all other benefits in terms of fiscal impacts, you know, more efficient use of infrastructure, more taxable value per acre, as well as the access to amenities that we talked about earlier.
The real question is, who makes these decisions? Is it the city council, commissioners, the state, the county? Who makes the decisions on these issues of land conservation and all that?
Yeah, so land could be preserved or conserved through different levels of government. The comprehensive, so you know, like a state park versus a federal national park and that sort of discussion, or just a local park, for instance, or even just on a specific development site, having an agreement for preservation. There's what's called cluster development that tries to push the development closer together on a site, and then the rest is preserved as open space. So there's different levels at which that could happen. But the comprehensive plan that I mentioned earlier that would probably, you know, is for a county or a city, that goes through your planning staff. So they'll do periodic updates on that. I think technically the update is every 7 years to comply at least with state law, but usually there's kind of a more robust update, and that would happen through your planning staff. There's usually an outreach and engagement component to those updates. And then that does get approved by your local governing body, you know, your city council, your county commission, those sorts of updates. And then from that flows your development regulation updates, because those need to comply with that comprehensive plan. So that would be a local government level decision.
Okay, I'll make this quick. One of the things they haven't addressed is building codes. Do we need to build up to a category 5? You know, one of the recent things is a blow test for your front doors. That seems to be a little bit ridiculous. The other thing is, should we have these things up at the state level? Because the comprehensive plan involves the local, so you have a lot of the NIMBYism in terms of trying to get these things across. The Live Local Act did remove the residential requirement for facilitating housing. They added the mixed use, but as a result, they took out some of the residential. Why is there an emphasis on home ownership? The SHIP program, 65% from home ownership. I mean, why is not at least a comparable thing for rental? Small developments, the funding's very limited. You need 60%. You need at least like 60 units for you know, in order to get the tax credits, or also even the state, the sale program. So even if you have some properties that there may be a few acres, if you're not going to be able to get more than 60 units to get this funding. So obviously you're dealing with a lot of problems. So yes, we had the individual talking about the big development, but about the smaller things, because we've got property that's in small areas that we could develop. And it doesn't seem that that's being addressed.
Yeah, so there's a lot of topics there. I'll start just with the building code. So the building code over many decades has actually gone through some updates to respond to resiliency. And so I think with newer construction, you're already seeing buildings build to those newer building codes. There is an option to do local technical amendments to a building code that can also increase some additional resiliency options. And there's a community rating system that kind of incentivizes some of those strategies locally, where you can get some insurance premium benefits on that. And I know this came up even with the utilities. So that resilient design and resilient building design is something that local governments can consider. And there is some, you know, kind of immediate ability to kind of look at that already. And then other sort of building code updates would go through the traditional building code update that is definitely statewide, which is definitely more kind of technical process there. But that's a way to get, you know, to kind of introduce some more sustainability options. There might be some incentives that can be provided for green. I know there are some through the subsidy programs to build more sustainably. And that's it can be included in terms of the competitive consideration of those applications. So there's a few different avenues that kind of get at that sustainability question and also the resiliency question. And I think we're going to see more and more local governments starting to account for that, particularly in coastal areas, for their floodplain regulations, which is already something that local governments are also including in their codes of ordinances in terms of how they're going to handle that. So those are kind of the different avenues that are out there to kind of get at those resiliency considerations. And sometimes it's mitigating with building regulations. And sometimes it's like, we're going to kind of ease out of this area. You know, maybe this is a really flood prone area. maybe you'll consider a buyout program, for instance. So there's some different approaches there that definitely warrant further conversation. For the Live Local Act preemption, and in terms of, local governments kind of being beholden to NIMBYism or pushback on making changes, I do think that that is very much in the spirit of the Live Local Act. And that's not specific to Florida. A lot of states are starting to get into some preemption territory to address the shortcomings of local zoning. And so this could, this could be something that's considered for further legislative sessions. So that's kind of something that we're monitoring and kind of seeing what the appetite would be for that. And so I think this is kind of a starting point. And again, we're kind of seeing how it goes. But to your point, I think that that's exactly why, for instance, the land use preemption was introduced here to kind of help circumvent some of that local pushback. Home ownership versus rental. The sale program is in place to address rental. So you do have kind of the two different focuses of that between rental and home ownership. To your point on smaller development, I think that is that's a topic that is of great interest. What's called missing middle housing. I think I had a slide that kind of had that term on it. That sometimes is used to refer to middle income, as Michael talked about, but a lot of times it's also used to refer to housing that is smaller scale multifamily. So that's those duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. And so, or maybe it's like a cluster of cottage, kind of small detached homes around a courtyard. That's another typology. So a lot of local governments are starting to look into how they can allow for more of those types of units and promote those and make sure they can actually be implemented based on all of the other land development regulations. So I would say that's a pretty hot topic right now in terms of zoning reform, is getting more of those in. And St. Pete actually just passed earlier this year a zoning district to allow for that. They targeted around transit major corridors that included transit routes. They avoided their coastal high hazard area. So there were some environmental and vulnerability considerations there. So that's kind of an example of what that might look like.
Thank you all, and I apologize for going over, but there's a lot of information, a lot of things for us to do. So I appreciate your indulgence in this, and we do want to work with you in the future. Thank you so much, Michael and Ali, for all the information that you provided. It certainly has given us a lot of resources, and we see the work that has been done and the work that we need to do in the future. Jacqueline mentioned the ways that you can work with us. Please do come to the educational meetings. If you want to participate with us in our committees, we would appreciate that. If you'd like to become a member, we would like that as well. Since we've started the meeting, we have one additional resource. We have some gun locks on the table over there. If you have a need for those or know a family member or neighbor who could utilize those to protect lives, we would appreciate your taking those. And again, we thank you very much for your participation. And we do have a board meeting. I'm going to give everyone a 3-minute break and we'll come back here. So thank you very much.
Okay.